I stopped defending myself on a Tuesday afternoon in March. That was the day I realized that some people need to discover the truth on their own terms, in their own time, because hearing it from you will never be enough. My sister Vanessa called me a liar in front of our entire family. Not in the heat of an argument, not in a moment of frustration, but calmly, deliberately, as if she was stating an obvious fact that everyone already knew. We were sitting in our parents' living room, the same room where we'd spent countless holidays and birthdays, as she looked at me with something between pity and contempt and said, "You know, the problem with Rachel is that she's always made things up to get attention. She's been doing it since we were kids." I remember the weight of the silence that followed. My mother's teacup frozen halfway to her lips. My father's newspaper slowly lowering. My younger brother Tim glancing between us like he was watching a tennis match. And Vanessa, sitting there with her legs crossed, her expression serene, waiting for me to explode or defend myself or do whatever it was she expected me to do. I did nothing. I took a sip of my coffee, which had gone lukewarm, and I said nothing at all. Because in that moment, with everyone's eyes on me, I understood something fundamental. I understood that I had been playing a game I could never win. For years, I had been trying to prove myself to people who had already decided what they believed about me. And I was tired. I was so deeply, completely tired. The context for Vanessa's accusation was mundane, which somehow made it worse. I had mentioned at dinner the previous evening that I'd seen our cousin Derek at a coffee shop downtown and that he'd seemed upset about something but didn't want to talk about it. Derek lived 3 hours away and rarely visited, so it seemed worth mentioning. Vanessa had immediately said that couldn't be true because Derek was out of the country on business. When I insisted I'd seen him, she'd laughed in that particular way she had, that way that suggested she found my persistence both amusing and pathetic. The next day, Derek posted photos on social media from a work conference overseas, dated 2 days before I claimed to have seen him. Vanessa had showed these photos to everyone, and then she'd made her pronouncement about my character, about my lifelong pattern of fabrication, about how I'd always needed to be the center of attention. I could have explained that I'd gotten my days confused, that the coffee shop encounter had been the previous week, not the previous day. I could have pulled out my credit card statement showing a purchase at that exact coffee shop on the date I actually meant. I could have pointed out that a simple mistake about timing didn't make me a liar, that conflating an honest error with deliberate deception was itself a kind of lie. I could have done all of these things. Instead, I finished my coffee and excused myself. I had a project deadline to meet, I said, which was true. I kissed my mother's cheek, nodded to my father, and left. Vanessa texted me that evening. "I know you're upset, but someone had to say it. You've been doing this for years, and everyone's too polite to call you out. I'm helping you." I didn't respond. 3 days later, she texted again. "Are you seriously giving me the silent treatment over this? Grow up, Rachel." I didn't respond to that either. Here's what I knew about my sister, what I had learned over 32 years of being her younger sibling. Vanessa needed to be right. Not occasionally, not about important things, but about everything, all the time. She needed to be the smartest person in the room, the most successful, the most admired. And when reality didn't support that narrative, she bent reality until it did. I had watched her do this our entire lives. When she got a B on a test in high school, it was because the teacher had graded unfairly. When she didn't get the promotion she wanted at work, it was because her boss was threatened by competent women. When her boyfriend broke up with her, it was because he couldn't handle being with someone so independent. Nothing was ever her fault. Nothing was ever her mistake. And if you suggested otherwise, even gently, you became the problem. I had been the problem many times over the years. I had questioned her stories, pointed out inconsistencies, offered alternative perspectives. Each time she had found a way to reframe the situation so that I was the difficult one, the jealous one, the one who couldn't be happy for her success. The lie about Derek was just the most recent example, but it was the one that made me realize I needed to change my approach. Because it wasn't just Vanessa who believed I was a liar now. My mother had looked at me with doubt. My father had looked away. Even Tim, who usually stayed out of family drama, had seemed uncertain. Vanessa had successfully rewritten history, and I was the villain in her version of events. So I decided to stop trying to correct the narrative. I decided to let time do what I could not. The first few weeks were harder than I expected. My mother called several times, her voice carefully neutral, asking if everything was okay. I told her everything was fine, that I'd just been busy with work. She said that Vanessa was worried about me, that Vanessa thought I was angry with her. I said I wasn't angry, which was true. I was something else entirely, something that didn't have a simple name. My father sent an email suggesting that families needed to communicate, that silence solved nothing. I replied that I agreed completely, that communication was important, but that I also believed in choosing one's battles. He didn't respond to that. Tim called and asked me directly what was going on. Tim was 27, 5 years younger than me, 7 years younger than Vanessa. He'd always been caught between us, trying to maintain peace, trying to see everyone's perspective. I told him the truth. I told him that I decided to stop defending myself against accusations that would never be believed anyway. I told him that I loved our family, but I was done trying to prove my honesty to people who had already decided I was dishonest. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I believe you know, about Derek. I know you wouldn't lie about something like that." I felt something crack open in my chest, some small space I'd been holding tight. "Thank you," I said. But he continued, and I heard the hesitation in his voice. "Vanessa showed us the photos, the dates." "I know," I said. "I got the day wrong. It happens, so why didn't you just say that? Why didn't you explain?" I thought about how to answer that. How to explain that some explanations don't help, that some people aren't interested in understanding, that sometimes the act of defending yourself is itself an admission of guilt in the eyes of those who want to see you guilty. "Because I'm tired, Tim," I finally said. "I'm tired of explaining, I'm tired of proving, I'm tired of being on trial in my own family." He didn't know what to say to that. We talked about other things for a while, his work at the marketing firm, his new apartment, a trip he was planning. Before we hung up, he said, "For what it's worth, I don't think you're a liar." "I know," I said. "And that's worth everything." Work became my refuge. I was a data analyst for a mid-sized consulting firm, and I'd recently been promoted to senior analyst. The promotion had come with more responsibility, more visibility, and more respect. In my professional life, I was competent, reliable, and trusted. The contrast with my family life was stark and painful. My manager, Patricia, was a woman in her 50s who had built her career on careful attention to detail and unflinching honesty. She had hired me 3 years earlier, and she'd become something of a mentor. During a one-on-one meeting about a month after the Derek incident, she asked me if everything was all right. "You seem distant," she said. "Not in your work, which is excellent as always, but you seem like you're somewhere else." I considered deflecting, offering some bland reassurance. Instead, I found myself telling her what had happened. I kept it brief, factual. I didn't expect advice. I think I just needed someone to hear me who wasn't part of the family system, who didn't have a stake in maintaining peace or protecting feelings. Patricia listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I had a sister who did something similar, different specifics, same pattern. She needed everyone else to be smaller so she could feel big. What did you do?" I asked. "I stopped playing," Patricia said. "I stopped trying to win an argument I was never going to win. I focused on building a life where her opinion of me didn't matter." She paused. It took a long time, years, but eventually she ran out of people who would believe her stories. She'd burned too many bridges, contradicted herself too many times. The truth has a way of coming out, but only if you're patient enough to wait for it. "How long did it take?" I asked. "Does it matter?" she said, not unkindly. "The alternative is to spend those years fighting battles that exhaust you and change nothing. At least this way, you're free." Freedom. That was what I was choosing, I realized. Not victory, not vindication, but freedom from the need for either. Vanessa continued to text occasionally. Short messages, usually framed as concern. "Mom says you're working too much. Dad thinks you're avoiding family events. Are you ever going to talk to me about what happened?" I responded to the factual ones. When she asked if I was coming to Tim's birthday dinner, I said yes, I'd be there. When she asked if I'd received the information about our parents' anniversary party, I confirmed that I had. When she asked personal questions or made observations about my behavior, I said nothing. My silence seemed to frustrate her more than any argument could have. I realized she'd been expecting me to fight back, to defend myself, to engage. My refusal to do so disrupted something fundamental in our dynamic. She couldn't position herself as the reasonable one, the patient one, if I wasn't being unreasonable or impatient. She couldn't be the victim of my anger if I wasn't angry. At Tim's birthday dinner, I was polite, present, and entirely unremarkable. I brought a gift he'd mentioned wanting. I talked with my parents about their planned vacation. I answered questions about work. I was pleasant to Vanessa, neither warm nor cold, as if she were a distant acquaintance rather than my sister. At one point, my mother pulled me aside in the kitchen. "Sweetheart," she said, "I know there's tension between you and Vanessa. Whatever happened, don't you think it's time to talk about it?" "There's no tension, Mom," I said. "Everything's fine. You barely looked at each other all evening. We're both busy," I said. "We're both focused on other conversations. That's not tension. That's just life." She studied my face, trying to read something there. I kept my expression neutral, warm, untroubled. Finally, she said, "I just want my daughters to be close." "I know," I said, and I hugged her because I did know, because I understood that she meant well, even if she didn't understand what she was asking for. Vanessa cornered me as I was leaving. "This is ridiculous," she said quietly, standing too close to me in the entryway. "You're acting like a child." "I'm not sure what you mean," I said. "This whole act, the silent treatment, the cold shoulder, just say what you need to say." "I don't have anything to say," I told her, and I meant it. What was there to say? That she'd called me a liar. She knew that. That it had hurt? She knew that too, or she didn't care, and either way, telling her wouldn't change anything. "So that's it," she said. "You were just going to cut me out." "I'm not cutting you out," I said. "I'm here, aren't I? I'll be at the anniversary party. I'll be at Christmas. I'm not going anywhere, but you're different." "Yes," I agreed. "I am." I left before she could respond. The thing about waiting for truth to reveal itself is that it requires genuine patience. Not the performative kind, not the kind where you're secretly keeping score and waiting for vindication. Real patience means accepting that vindication might never come, at least not in the form you want, at least not when you want it. I went to therapy. I'd been before, years earlier, after a difficult breakup, and I'd found it helpful. This time, I went because I needed to make sure I was making the right choice. I needed to know that my decision to step back wasn't just avoidance, wasn't just cowardice dressed up as wisdom. My therapist, Dr. Morgan, was a calm presence who rarely offered direct advice. Instead, she asked questions that helped me find my own answers. Over several sessions, we explored my relationship with Vanessa, my patterns in the family, my fear of conflict, my need for external validation. "Tell me about the last time Vanessa apologized to you," Dr. Morgan said during one session. I thought about it. I thought hard. "I don't think she ever has," I finally said. "And do you think that will change if you keep engaging with her the way you have been?" "No," I said. "So what are you protecting by continuing to engage? What are you hoping for?" That was the question that broke something open. What was I hoping for? That she would suddenly see me clearly? That she would acknowledge her mistake? That my family would recognize the truth without me having to prove it? "I'm hoping," I said slowly, "that I won't have to be the one who changes, that someone else will change instead." Dr. Morgan nodded. "And how has that hope been working out for you?" I laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Not well. Change is hard," she said. "Especially when it feels like you're the only one doing it, but sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is change your expectations, change your boundaries, change your level of investment, not because the other person deserves it, but because you deserve better than what you've been getting." I thought about that for a long time. About what I deserved. About what I'd been accepting. Summer came. The anniversary party for my parents was in June, a backyard celebration with extended family and friends. I helped with the planning, contributed to the gift, showed up early to help set up. Vanessa did the same. We moved around each other with practiced ease, two people who had learned to occupy the same space without truly connecting. Our Aunt Linda, my mother's sister, pulled me aside at one point. "You and Vanessa seem distant," she observed. She was a perceptive woman, a retired teacher who noticed everything. "We're both busy," I said, the same line I'd been using for months. She said, unconvinced. "I remember when you two were little, Vanessa always had to be first to read, first to ride a bike, first to do everything, and when you did something before her, she'd find a way to diminish it or claim she'd done it better." I looked at her, surprised. I hadn't realized anyone else had noticed. "Your mother always said it was healthy competition," Linda continued. I wasn't so sure. Competition implies that both people are playing the same game, but I always got the feeling you weren't interested in competing. You were just trying to exist. "That's exactly it," I said quietly. I was just trying to exist, and now I'm trying to exist on my own terms. She patted my hand. Good for you, honey. Some relationships improve with distance, some don't, but either way, you have to put your own oxygen mask on first. The party was pleasant. My parents were happy, surrounded by people who loved them. I genuinely enjoyed talking with cousins I hadn't seen in years, neighbors who had watched us grow up, friends of the family who had stories about my parents I'd never heard. It was a good day, and Vanessa's presence didn't diminish that, because I didn't let it. Near the end of the evening, I overheard a conversation I wasn't meant to hear. I'd gone into the house to get more ice, and I heard voices in the kitchen. My mother and Vanessa. I'm worried about Rachel, Vanessa was saying. She's so withdrawn lately, so distant from the family. She seems fine to me, my mother said. She's been very helpful with the party, very present, that's what I mean. It's like she's going through the motions, like she's here, but not really here. There was a pause. Then my mother said, Vanessa, can I ask you something? What happened between you two? Really happened? Nothing happened, I told you. I just pointed out that she'd made up a story about seeing Derek, and she's been sulking ever since, made up or got confused. Another pause, longer this time. Does it matter? I think it might, my mother said. Because your sister has never been a liar. She might get details wrong sometimes, we all do, but she doesn't make things up, and I'm starting to wonder if maybe you were too harsh. I was honest, Vanessa said, but there was something defensive in her tone now. Someone needed to be. Honest is different from kind, my mother said. And it's different from accurate. I stood in the hallway, holding a bag of ice, and I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. I felt my mother, in her careful way, beginning to question the narrative Vanessa had created. I hadn't asked her to. I hadn't pleaded my case. I'd simply stopped defending myself, and in that space my mother had started to think for herself. I walked back outside with the ice before they realized I'd been there. Fall came. I turned 33 in September. I had a small celebration with friends from work, people who knew me in a context entirely separate from my family. It was casual, comfortable, the kind of gathering where no one was performing or competing or trying to prove anything. Just people who liked each other, enjoying an evening together. Vanessa texted on my birthday. Happy birthday, sis, hope you're well. I texted back. Thanks. She tried to call later that evening. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail saying we should talk, that she missed me, that she didn't understand why I was shutting her out. Her voice had a quality I recognized, a careful construction of hurt that was meant to make me feel guilty, meant to make me the one who needed to apologize. I deleted the voicemail. In October, something shifted. Tim called me, his voice tight. Did you hear what happened with Vanessa? No, I said. What happened? She told everyone that she'd been offered a major promotion at work, like a really big deal, VP of marketing. She even posted about it on social media, thanking everyone for their support. Okay, I said, waiting. Rachel, she lied. There was no promotion. Her company doesn't even have a VP of marketing position. Someone she works with saw the post and commented, confused because they just filled their leadership team and Vanessa wasn't part of it. She deleted the comment, but other people had already seen it. The whole thing is a mess. I sat down slowly. What did she say when people asked her about it? She's saying it was a misunderstanding, that she'd been told she was being considered for a role that didn't end up happening, that she jumped the gun on the announcement. But Rachel, people are checking her story, her coworkers are talking. It's not looking good. I felt a complicated tangle of emotions. Not satisfaction exactly, not pleasure in her pain, but something like recognition, something like inevitability. Are you there? Tim asked. I'm here, I said. Mom and Dad are upset. They're trying to figure out what's true. Vanessa is acting like everyone is overreacting, like she's the victim here. He paused. This isn't the first time, is it, that she stretched the truth? No, I said quietly. It's not. The thing about Derek, he said. You really did see him, didn't you? Just on a different day than you first said. Yes, and she called you a liar anyway. Yes. He was quiet. Then, I'm sorry, I should have backed you up. You didn't know, I said. I should have asked more questions. I should have known that you wouldn't lie about something so stupid. That's not who you are. I felt tears sting my eyes. Thank you for saying that. What are you going to do? He asked. Are you going to say something to her, to Mom and Dad? No, I said. I'm not going to say anything. Really? Why not? Because they're figuring it out on their own now. They are starting to see what I've seen for years, and that means more than anything I could say. The fallout from Vanessa's lie played out over the following weeks. She tried to control the narrative, to minimize the damage, but the truth had a momentum of its own now. People who had believed our stories for years were starting to question them. Colleagues were sharing other examples of exaggerations, small lies, convenient adjustments to reality. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would ruin her life, but enough to shift how people saw her. My mother called me in early November. "Can we meet for lunch?" she asked. "Just the two of us?" We met at a quiet cafe near her house. She looked tired, older somehow. We ordered, made small talk about the weather and the holidays, and then she said, "I owe you an apology." I waited. "When Vanessa said you'd lied about Derek, I didn't defend you. I should have. I know you, Rachel. I know you're not a liar, but I didn't say that. I let her version of events stand, and I let you leave that day without supporting you, Mom," I said gently. "No, let me finish. I've been thinking about this a lot lately, about how many times over the years I've let Vanessa's version of events become the official version. Even when I had doubts, I told myself I was keeping the peace. I told myself that her confidence meant she was probably right, but I wasn't being fair to you." I felt something loosen in my chest, some knot I'd been carrying for months, maybe years. "The thing with her job," my mother continued. "That wasn't a misunderstanding. That was a lie, a deliberate lie, and it made me look back at other things, other times when maybe the truth was more complicated than what she'd presented, more complicated than what I'd accepted. I'm not asking you to choose sides," I said. "I know you're not," she said. "You haven't asked for anything. That's what finally got through to me. You stopped fighting, stopped defending, stopped trying to prove yourself, and I realized that you'd been doing it for so long, using so much energy to be heard, and I'd let you do it alone." We were both crying now, quiet tears that we didn't try to hide. "I love your sister," my mother said. "I always will, but I'm starting to understand that loving someone doesn't mean believing everything they say. It doesn't mean enabling behavior that hurts other people. And it doesn't mean asking the person who's been hurt to just keep absorbing it for the sake of family peace. What are you going to do?" I asked. "I'm going to start asking more questions," she said. "I'm going to start listening differently, and I'm going to rebuild trust with you if you'll let me." I reached across the table and took her hand. "Of course I'll let you." We talked for another hour. She asked me about work, about my life, about things she realized she hadn't asked about in months because she'd been so focused on managing family dynamics. I told her about the promotion, about the new project I was leading, about a hiking trip I was planning with friends. She listened in a way she hadn't in a long time, really listened, without dividing her attention between my words and her worry about Vanessa's reaction. Before we left, she said, How did you know that stepping back was the right thing to do?" "I didn't," I admitted. "I just knew that what I'd been doing wasn't working. I knew I was exhausted from trying to prove my worth to people who should have already known it. So I stopped trying to make people see me and started focusing on seeing myself clearly. And I like what I see," I said. "I like who I am when I'm not constantly defending myself. I like the life I'm building. I like feeling free." Thanksgiving was approaching. Family was planning the usual gathering at my parents' house. I knew it would be complicated, that Vanessa would be there, that the atmosphere would be charged with everything unspoken. The day before Thanksgiving, Vanessa called me. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Hi," she said. Her voice was different, smaller somehow. "Hi," I said. "I know you probably don't want to talk to me," she said. "I know you're angry." "I'm not angry," I said, and it was true. "Here's something though. I'm tired, Vanessa. I'm tired of this pattern we've been in for our entire lives." She was quiet. "Then I shouldn't have called you a liar about Derek. You were right. You'd seen him. Just on a different day. I know," I said. "I'm sorry." I waited for the relief, the vindication, the satisfaction of hearing those words. But what I felt instead was a kind of sadness because I knew that this apology wasn't the end of anything. It was just a moment of clarity in a pattern that would likely continue in different forms for years to come. "Thank you for saying that," I said. "Are we okay?" she asked. "We're figuring it out," I said. "But it's going to take time, and it's going to require that we interact differently than we have been." What does that mean? It means I'm not going to keep defending myself against accusations. That means I'm not going to keep proving my honesty to you. It means that if you want to have a relationship with me, it needs to be one where you actually believe me when I tell you something. "That's not fair," she said. Everyone makes mistakes, you're right, I agreed. Everyone makes mistakes, but this wasn't a mistake. Vanessa, you didn't accidentally call me a liar. You chose to. You chose to say it in front of everyone, to make it a statement about my character. That was the choice. I was trying to help you, she said, and I heard the defensiveness creeping back into her voice. I thought you needed to hear some hard truths. No, I said, and my voice was steady, clear. You were trying to make yourself look better by making me look worse, and I'm not going to pretend that's the same thing as helping me. She didn't respond for a long moment. Then, I don't know how to fix this. Maybe you don't need to fix it, I said. Maybe you just need to be honest with me, with yourself, with everyone. Maybe you need to stop needing to be right all the time and start being okay with being human. Is that what you think of me? Her voice was tight now. That I can't be human? I think you're afraid to be human, I said. I think you're afraid that if people see your mistakes, your confusion, your ordinary human flaws, they won't think you're special anymore. But Vanessa, that's not how it works. People don't love you because you're perfect. They love you despite your flaws because of your humanity. But first, they have to be able to see it. She was crying now. I could hear it in her breathing. I'll see you tomorrow, I said gently. At Thanksgiving, we don't have to resolve everything right now. We just have to start being honest with each other. I hung up before she could respond. Thanksgiving was strange, but not in the way I expected. There was a carefulness to the day, a sense that everyone was paying attention to dynamics they'd previously ignored. My father was quieter than usual, watchful. My mother was attentive in a new way, checking in with both Vanessa and me, but not in that frantic peacekeeping way she did before. Tim seemed relieved that things were being acknowledged, even if they weren't being resolved. Vanessa was subdued. She was polite, helpful, present, but without her usual need to dominate conversations or stir narratives. At one point, she and I ended up in the kitchen together, washing dishes. Thank you, she said quietly, for what you said yesterday about being human. I glanced at her. You're welcome. I've been thinking about it, about how scared I am of people seeing me mess up. I don't know when that started, but it's exhausting. Yes, I said. It is. How did you stop caring what people think? I didn't stop caring, I said. I just started caring more about what I think of myself, and I started choosing relationships with people who see me clearly and like me anyway. She nodded, slowly processing that. We finished the dishes in companionable silence, and it felt like something small but real, a beginning of something different. The rest of the holiday season passed more smoothly than I'd expected. There were still moments of tension, still old patterns that threatened to reassert themselves, but there was also more honesty, more willingness to name things that had been ignored for too long. In January, nearly a year after the incident with Derek, I had lunch with Vanessa. Just the two of us at her request. She'd been in therapy, she told me, working on why she needed external validation so badly, why she couldn't tolerate being wrong, why she'd built so much of her identity on being seen as perfect. It's hard work, she said. Admitting that I've hurt people, admitting that I've lied, even about small things because I couldn't handle the truth making me look bad. I'm proud of you for doing it, I said, and I meant it. Are we going to be okay? She asked. Really okay? I don't know, I said honestly. I think we can be something better than we were, but it's going to take time, and it's going to require that you keep doing this work, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. I will, she said. I promise. Don't promise me, I said. Promise yourself. We parted with a hug that felt more genuine than any we'd shared in years. Here's what I learned from that year of silence, of stepping back, of letting truth reveal itself without my constant intervention. I learned that some battles aren't worth fighting, not because you can't win them, but because winning them wouldn't give you what you actually need. I learned that respect earned through patience and consistency means more than respect demanded through argument. I learned that the people who truly matter will eventually see the truth, and the ones who don't weren't really seeing you anyway. I learned that freedom isn't about being understood by everyone. It's about understanding yourself clearly enough that external misunderstanding doesn't shake you. Most of all, I learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing at all. Not passive nothing, not defeated nothing, but active, intentional nothing. The nothing that says, I know my truth, and I don't need to convince you of it. The nothing that says, I'm going to live my life with integrity, and time will show who I am. The nothing that says, I'm done playing games I was never meant to win. My relationship with Vanessa is still complicated. It probably always will be. But it's different now, built on a foundation of honesty rather than performance. We're learning to be sisters in a new way, one that allows for imperfection, for mistakes, for humanity. My relationship with my parents has deepened. They've started asking questions instead of making assumptions. They've started seeing the dynamics they'd been missing. They've started treating me like someone whose perspective matters, whose experience is valid, whose truth doesn't need to be proven. And my relationship with myself, that's the one that changed most dramatically. I'm no longer the person who needs external validation to know her worth. I'm no longer the person who exhausts herself trying to prove things to people who don't want to see them. I'm the person who knows herself, who trusts herself, who has built a life on her own terms. When I think back to that Tuesday afternoon in March, to the moment Vanessa called me a liar, I almost want to thank her. Not for the pain she caused, but for the clarity that came after. For forcing me to make a choice between defending myself endlessly and claiming my own peace. For showing me that sometimes the most radical thing you can do is simply refuse to participate in someone else's narrative about who you are. I chose peace. I chose patience. I chose to let truth emerge in its own time, through its own channels. And it did. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. More than enough. If you're in a situation where someone is telling lies about you, where your character is being questioned, where you're exhausted from defending yourself, I want you to know something. You don't have to keep fighting. You don't have to keep proving yourself. You can choose to step back, to live your truth quietly and consistently, to trust that the people who matter will eventually see clearly. It won't happen overnight. It won't be easy. There will be moments when you want to scream, when you want to force people to see, when you want to make them understand. But if you can wait, if you can be patient, if you can focus on living with integrity rather than winning arguments, the truth has a way of revealing itself. Not because truth always triumphs, but because lies require constant maintenance. They require energy, attention, consistent reinforcement. Truth just is. It sits there, steady and solid, waiting to be noticed by anyone who cares to look. So if you're tired of fighting, give yourself permission to stop. Not because you're giving up, but because you're choosing something better. You're choosing to invest your energy in building a life worth living rather than in battles that exhaust you. You're choosing freedom. And trust me, freedom is worth the wait. If you've been the family's scapegoat or the one who's had to constantly prove themselves, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. How did you handle it? Did you confront it directly, or did you take a step back like I did? Let me know your thoughts below.